their little religious fantasy world they created so that you won't think beyond that. The conspiracy theory about the Illuminati is not all wrong. It's some truth mixed in with lies. So the ruling class really is pulling off some sinister shit on us. But so long as you view everything through the framework they created for you, it doesn't make a difference whether you know or not, because you're not going to be able to do anything about it. You're not even going to try to do anything about it. If you're a black person looking at this symbol, sitting there with African blood flowing all through your veins, and you're thinking that this is the eye of Lucifer, that the symbolism that this represents is the work of Satan, then they've already got you. You've already clicked on the ad. You've already downloaded the virus into your system. You've been so spooked by the idea that it's from Satan that you won't even bother to learn anything about it. And the only information that you will accept comes from the mouth of your enemy. Who is telling you that this symbol is satanic? Where is that coming from? Who is linking Horus and Lucifer and Satan? Where is that coming from? That doesn't even... When you look at Horus, Horus is a benevolent deity. So how is he getting linked to this evil and satanic propaganda? How's that happening? Who's doing it? What near as I can tell is this association between the eye of Ra, the eye of Horus, to Lucifer and Satan comes from two main guys, Christian fundamentalists, of course. One is Fritz Springmeier, and the other one is Bill Schnoebelen, I think is how you pronounce it. These two Christians are the ones that are mainstreaming and headlining these ideas of the Eye of Horus being satanic. But if you read their works, you'll see that they call everything satanic. See, when they say satanic, they only mean not of the Christian faith. Anything not of the Christian faith is satanic. I'm gonna see if I can't pull up. I read a little bit of their book, so I'm gonna see if I can't pull it up and show you some of the things that they say. Fritz Springmeier is the one that wrote the book about the 13 Illuminati bloodlines, and near as I can tell, he's the one that popularized this idea of the Illuminati being a set of ancient bloodlines that pass on this authority and power through the generations and through the bloodlines, through selective breeding or whatever. But it's interesting. It's interesting to me because he traces these bloodlines back to Egypt and Babylon. Now remember, Babylon, quote unquote. He's saying that the first ancient civilizations of Mesopotamia. So when he says Babylon, he's meaning the very first people. He's tracing these people back to, as he says in the book, he's tracing these people back to Nimrod. Now Nimrod is related to Ham. In the Bible, Nimrod is related to Ham and Canaan and Cush. And these are the people who populated Africa. So I have to wonder, in this theory of his, where he comes in and he tells you that all this African spirituality is evil. If that's where these bloodlines descend from, how is it that everybody, all these Illuminati families, or if most of them, if not all of them, how are these Illuminati families all white Europeans? How's that possible? Where's that? How'd they become white Europeans? How do you get white European out of first civilization Middle Easterner and African? How do you get white European out of that? It's nothing but a perversion. It's nothing but a perversion. He is saying that he is tracing these Illuminati members back to biblical characters, and that is why they are able to be ancient and in these ancient lands and still be white Europeans, because that you can trace biblical characters, these Semitic characters, these light-skinned Semitic characters, to European. It does not. He even distinguishes in his book between these people he's linking the Illuminati to and black people. He even does that specifically in his book. It's not just me noticing this. It's not just me pointing it out or making an issue out of it. It's what he himself did. I'm gonna see if I can't show that from his book. And you'll see here from his book where you get this notion of satanic from. This notion of satanic is basically anything that is not Christian is satanic. That is the only definition. So when you hear satanic, you're thinking of Satan, you're thinking of evil, you're thinking of darkness, you're thinking of wickedness, but it has nothing to do with any of that. It's just that it is not Christian. So it becomes a meaningless term as he's using it. He's just throwing the word satanic around to create that fear. Let's talk about, now that we're bringing them up, let's talk about Satan and Lucifer. Let's talk about that guy real quick. Like I said in the intro video, Satan is nothing but a boogeyman character, and it's actually a little bit embarrassing to see niggas still afraid of him. It's because it's watching someone just take advantage of you. It's watching someone play you for a fool, and watching them laugh at you, laugh behind your back as you worry about this phantom enemy. The whole mythos of Satan is It's so phony. It's not even funny. If you look at the Old Testament, Satan is not even evil in the Old Testament. There is no there are no verses or passages you can go to in the Old Testament where Satan is portrayed as an evil being or in any way the enemy of Yahweh. In the Old Testament, Yahweh and Satan are cool with one another. They talk. They're cool. Satan has carte blanche. He can go to and from heaven anytime he wants to. Nowhere in the Old Testament is Satan identified as the serpent in the garden that tempted Eve to eat the fruit. Nowhere. Nowhere in the Old Testament is Satan this evil being that we know of today. Satan as an evil being, this is something that happens in between the testaments. It's not in the Old Testament. This happens during this time period between the testaments where the Jews get conquered by these different people. You know, the Persians, the Greeks, etc., etc., and they start adopting all their mythology into their own. That is when Satan becomes an evil being. When you get to the New Testament, all of a sudden Satan is an enemy of God. It's like it's such a sharp difference between the Old Testament. I don't know how people can't notice this. The book of Revelation tells you that Satan was kicked out of heaven. It says that because of some war between his angels and Yahweh's angels. This war does not exist in the Old Testament. This war is when they adopted the mythology of the Greeks and they took the war between Zeus and his gods and the Titans, and they turned that into a battle between Yahweh and Satan's angels. That's all that is. That does not exist in the Old Testament. We see in the book of Job, not only do we see Satan and God being cool with one another, we see Satan walking around earth. Now, if Satan is the serpent, and the serpent was punished by having his arms and legs removed, how is Satan walking around earth? How is that happening? Now, some people will try to say, if they want to try to defend this discrepancy, they'll try to say that, well, this Satan wasn't actually the serpent, because serpents can't talk. He was just possessing the serpent. Well, if that can't be the case, because if that were the case, then there would have been no reason and no justice behind Yahweh punishing all the snakes in his seed to not have arms and legs. If it were not the serpent himself that did these things, then Yahweh would have had no reason to punish the serpent for something that Satan did. The serpent was not responsible for Eve eating of the fruit. Satan was. So the serpent would not have been punished for all of his generations of children and seeds to not have arms and legs. That was their punishment. Snakes don't have arms and legs to this day. So the punishment was not to Satan, the punishment was to the serpent. And if Satan was kicked out of heaven, then why in the book of Job is he able to walk to and from heaven, go to and from heaven? We know from the book of Revelation that this happened in the beginning. This war between heaven and earth happened in the beginning. So how after this war is Satan able to go to and from heaven? Because the two mythologies are different. The mythology of the Old Testament Satan is not the same as the mythology of the New Testament Satan. But even the New Testament Satan does not line up with this complete boogeyman Satan that people believe in today. Like, you'll see people say, they use him as an excuse for everything. You'll see people say, if someone points out that the Bible was copied off of previous myths, and they'll say Jesus. If I say Jesus is copied off of Osiris, you'll get someone say something like, Satan in ancient times went back and he created these false gods after the mold and image of Jesus, because he already, being Satan, he knew the story of Jesus and what was going to happen. So he put that story out ahead of time to create these false gods so that people today would not believe in Jesus and just think he was a copy. When I first heard that, I was like, this motherfucker's insane. Then the second time I heard it, I was like, well, damn, this nigga's crazy too. But then after, I've heard it so many times now, I've become to realize that it's just so easy and comfortable. Satan becomes such a boogeyman character. It's just so easy and comfortable to blame stuff on him, even though that doesn't even line up at all with the biblical image of Satan. If any of this, there's no biblical foundation for any of this shit. If you were to go back in the Old Testament, if this were the case and Satan was really doing this, why is there no mention of it? If you go back to the Old Testament when the Jews were enslaved supposedly in Egypt, there is no mention anywhere of there being this evil Satan running around giving the Egyptians Osiris to mock the coming of the future Savior, the future Messiah. There's nowhere even hinted anywhere in the Old Testament about this happening. It's complete fabrication. Just as it's fabrication, this idea that Satan was called Lucifer in heaven. He was his great angel, and then he rebelled against God and he was thrown from heaven to earth and called Satan. Completely fabricated. Lucifer and Satan are not even the same person.